Hey guys, welcome back. I am Chris with Marksman Shooting Sports and WeBuyGuns.com in Westfield, Indiana, and you are watching Marksman TV. Today I'm going to show you my top 5 picks of my all-time favorite AK pattern rifles. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into that now. Okay, jumping into this first, spoiler alert, there is going to be nothing US manufactured in this video. I am a huge fan of US made products other than those having to do with AKs. There are a lot of domestic AK manufacturers. Some of them are actually pretty good, but none of them rank in my top 5. So with that out of the way, let's move in through this video with our number 5 spot. This is a Romanian Cougar manufactured GP Wasser 1063. Now there are a few other variants of the Wasser series of rifle, but if we look at the Wasser series of rifle as a whole, we can say their importation into the United States started back in about 1997 with the WUM series of rifles. Now those would have the big thumb hole stocks and you didn't have a bayonet lug and no threaded muzzles. Now, when the the assault weapons ban would sunset in 2004, they would release the GP Wasser 10, GP standing for general purpose. So they would add back a standard stock, pistol grip configuration, bayonet lug, and threaded muzzle. Now, they had the GP 10 and the 1063. The 1063 was made on surplus Romanian AKM parts, other than the receivers and the barrels. So you would actually, if you look at the trunnion on something like this is actually dated 1981, so it has that cool sort of Romanian military lineage and history added to it. If you don't care about that, the standard GP Wasser 10s are made on 100% new manufacturer parts, and they are still manufactured and imported into the United States today. Now, it is my opinion that anybody who has an AK collection, or if you just have a general rifle collection and you want an AK in that lineup, just any type of AK, the Wasser 10 series is the AK that I recommend to most people looking to get into their first, specifically if they're somewhat on a budget. I think this is the best bang for your buck AK on the market, and I know a lot of people agree. If you just want that one and done, the GP Wasser 10 or the 1063 or any variant of the Wasser family is definitely the way to go. Now these have obviously increased in price over the years. When I got back into these things in about 2010, 2011, these are about $450 new. Now, of course, if we go back a couple years ago when things were crazy, these things were selling for about $1,000 to $1,200 new. I've seen them stabilize around $900 to $1,000 new now, but you can get them used on the market between about $700 and $800 if you look in places like Gunbroker right now. So for that money, $700 to $800, these are a huge bargain. I highly recommend the GP Wasser 10 and 1063. They are phenomenal AKs and definitely worth the money. Okay, up next is another personal favorite of mine, obviously because it's on this list, but this is the Yugoslavian M70 ZPAP. Now this is a civilian version, 4th generation of this line, coming off of the M70 rifle design used by Yugoslavia, which was an unlicensed copy of really the Type 3 AK pattern rifle from Russia. This is a very popular rifle with a very steeped military history and is known above all other AKs for being incredibly rugged, and there's a few reasons for that. Now, if we look at Yugoslavia, they always like to do things a little bit differently and a little bit in their own way. If we look back to the SKS, their variant of that, which is very popular for having the big grenade spigot up at the front. They like the idea of being able to launch grenades right off the front end of the rifle. Other AK patterns typically use an under-the-barrel mounted grenade launching system. This, they wanted to launch them right off the front. You would typically have grenade launching sights on earlier variations as well. Because of that, they made several modifications to this design. First of all, you do have an elongated handguard here with 3 vent holes. That's the quickest way you're going to tell you're looking at a Yugoslavian AK. It is the only one that uses that type of handguard system. Next, you would have had on earlier imported the PAP, which is the civilian version, semi-automatic variants of the M70. So you have the NPAP, the OPAP, the ZPAP, and I'll explain those in just a minute. But in the earlier imported versions and on the military M70, you do have a grenade launching sight that pops up, and when you bring it up, it cuts off your gas system, so you can load blanks into your magazine and hand cycle those to launch your grenades right off the front. Now, because you're getting a lot of gas pressures coming back and everything, they reinforce the top cover with a latch that you actually have to push to remove the top cover. That is to keep, of course, all that blowback from blowing your top cover off when you're launching those grenades. So that's another quick identifier of a Yugoslavian AK. The third quick identifier is on all other AKM pattern rifles, you have a tang-mounted stock system. I'll show you that with the Yugoslavian AK we just looked at, or Romanian, I'm sorry. You see that little sort of, I guess you want to call it an arm protruding, a little tang protruding off the end of the receiver. The stock slides in and the screw goes in right through the top there. That's how it's mounted. Some of them have a double tang where you have one on the bottom here as well. Chinese AKs are known for those. This did not use that. You actually have a bolt that goes right through the back into the receiver. So those are your 3 quickest dead giveaways you're looking at a Yugoslavian AK. Now, because of their rigidity and their ruggedness, what makes these things built like tanks, you have 3 variations of the civilian rifles. You have the NPAP. That is a 1 millimeter thick receiver. That's your standard AKM stamped receiver thickness. You're going to find that on things like the Romanian Wasser 10 I just showed you. Then when they brought in the OPAP, they went to a 1.5 millimeter thick receiver, so heavier, thicker, and a RPK style trunnion up here at the front, so reinforced trunnion. So a very heavy, very high quality receiver and trunnion. Now, Century Arms was the main importer of these for a very long time. First, they were brought in by EAA, but Century has been the main importer of these for a long time until a few years ago, Zastava came out with Zastava USA, which is now bringing in all the Zastava rifles from Serbia into the United States. When they started doing that, they released the 4th generation import rifle, the ZPAP, with new manufactured wood. It's actually a very nice tiger striping on this particular example. They kept the 1.5 millimeter thick receiver with the bulged RBK style trunnion, so you're getting a very, very nice package here. They are a little bit pricier. Brand new, they are over $1,000. Used, you might find them hovering around the 900 to 1,000 mark, but they are a phenomenal, very high quality AK that has been militarily proven with Yugoslavia since, the 1970s. So definitely one I recommend taking a look at if you're looking for that one AK to put in your collection. Okay, up next is a very popular AK in a lot of collector circles. This is the Norenko Mac90. Now, the Mac90 is an import ban compliant variation of the 56S series of rifles that had been coming into the country since about the late 1980s, about 1987 or so. Now, in general, the pattern here is the Chinese military Type 56 rifle that of course would have been used in the Vietnam War and other military conflicts. So this is a very tested and very trusted AK pattern off of the original Soviet design. Now, if we look back in the United States in the 1980s, there had been a growing demand for a new AK pattern rifle to come into the market. Previously to that, you had the Finnish Valmet rifles, and then you had the Steyr imported Modi rifles, which were both pretty expensive. The U.S. consumer market wanted a cheaper alternative, so Norenko and Polytech would start bringing in Chinese-manufactured Type 56 variant semi-automatic sporting rifles into the United States market until 1989, when one was unfortunately used in the Stockton schoolyard shooting in California. Then President Bush Sr. would enact the importation restriction on such non-sporting rifles. So Norenko had to pivot to this, the Mac90. Now, the Mac90 in its original form had a big thumbhole stock on it. This one does not have the threaded muzzle. They did not have a bayonet lug. It basically had to be featureless to be proven to be a rifle coming in for sporting purposes. Again, remember, this is before the 1994 assault weapons ban. So in 1990, they start bringing in this rifle. It is in every way, shape, and form identical to the very reliable Type 56 pattern of rifle. However, it just had those importation features. Now, in 1994, this would be discontinued from importation altogether, so these had only been coming into the country for about 3 to 4 years or so. They also had the NHM91, which was an RPK-style variation, much in the similar type of form. Now, this has been replaced with original Chinese Type 56 wood furniture, so this is just like a pre-ban, if you will, other than the fact that it does not have a threaded muzzle or bayonet lug. Now, the reason I'm talking about the Mac90 in general and specifics here is the Mac90, because of its ban era compliant parts, especially a lot of the ones you find with the thumbhole stock, are typically priced quite a bit less than what you're going to find in the pre-importation ban Type 56 rifles, the S1, the S2, the S3, the fixed stock, the underfolder, and the side folding. Those, which, the pre-ban ones, are getting actually pretty pricey, anywhere from $2,000 to $3,000. Now, the good thing is you have the same reliability, you have the same quality, the attention to the beautiful finish that they put on these, the blonde wood stocks. But because they lack in that collectability, these are actually increasing. You find them anywhere from between about $1,200 to $1,500, and they're creeping up a little bit from there. But with that, you're getting a really, really nice quality rifle that does still have collectability because they're not imported into the country anymore. So anyway, for those reasons, I am a huge fan of the Mac90. And if you're looking at getting up over the $1,000 range, as a lot of AKs are, this is definitely not one to overlook. You can find them on GunBroker and stuff. Of course, you're not going to pick one up new at a gun store anymore, but just a really cool rifle that some people might not know about, so I wanted to make sure I included it in this list. So really cool, and that is the Norenko Mac90. Okay, up next is probably the most popular AK that's going to be in this video, at least by most people's standards, the type of AK that's going to show up in most AK purist collections, and that is going to be the Arsenal CM7. Now this is the CM7R, which is the full stock configuration. You have the SF with the side fold stock, and then you have the UF with the underfold stock, all chambered in 7.62 by 39. Now, Arsenal is a Bulgarian company, and the Arsenal CM7 actually hit the market in 2005 as a civilian semi-automatic rifle based off of the Bulgarian ARM-9F, which is a popular military rifle. So you're noticing quite a theme here that every AK in this video so far is actually a semi-automatic commercial version of a tried and tested military rifle, which I put a lot of weight in as an AK purchaser myself. Now, one thing that makes the CM7 series so popular is it is one of the only really respected milled receiver AKs that are commercially available on the market today that are newly manufactured. So all the rifles you've seen so far are known as AKMs. They are built on stamped receivers. The typical AK-47 was actually built on a milled receiver, so this is the closest to the pure AK-47 design out of anything you've seen so far. You can identify a milled AK receiver by the lightning cuts on either side of the receiver here. You do have a lot more manufacturing time required to build something like this, more material, more weight, and usually more cost. But you do get a lot of benefits there in the longevity and the rigidity of the rifle, especially that extra weight can help you with recoil control and things like that. If you have not picked up an Arsenal, they have the SLR series, which is their stamped receiver line. Both the SLRs and the SAM series rifles are excellent AKs. I cannot say enough good things about these. A lot of people scoff at the price because yes, they are pricey. Brand new right now, I believe $1,700 to $1,800 for any of the SAM rifles used. You might find them a hair cheaper than that. Then they have more collector series rifles with the ARM rail systems on them. Those go up over $2,000. People argue, why get one of those when you can get a Wasser for $800, like we've talked about? You really do feel a difference when you pick them up. Is it twice the price difference? I don't know. I can't really argue that. But I will say that these are excellent rifles, and I definitely love the SAM series of AK. Okay, last but definitely not least on my list, and this is definitely my favorite only because of the cool factor, really not because of the practicality versus the price tag, because these are very expensive and they're not, I wouldn't say, inherently a better rifle than any of the others that you've seen here on the table so far. This is a Norenko Type56 S2 side folder with the Bakelite furniture. Now when it comes to the Norenko, the pre-ban, this is a pre-ban, remember we talked about the Mac90, these are the ones that came before it. These are probably about as expensive as AKs get. I'll get a little bit into the pricing. Now you have the Chinese Type 56 rifle. Again, we talked about that. It was popularly or most commonly known as having served in the Vietnam War conflict. They brought in 1987 civilian semi-automatic variations. Norenko and Polytech would bring those into the country. The nomenclature on them, basically, if you look at the military designation, the standard rifle was the Type 56. The underfolder was the Type 56-1, and the side folder like this was the Type 56-2. Now you add the S designation for either semi or sporter, however which camp you belong to, I think sporter. They started coming into the country as semi-automatics known as the Type 56S for sporter, Type 56S1, and this the Type 56S2. Now they did have the Type 56S3, which was a full stock configuration but Bakelite furniture instead of wood. Those are probably the most rare out of all the configurations that had come in. With this, you have a push button at the top, side folder as the name would suggest. This does have its original Norenko Bakelite magazine that matches the furniture, which is not as easy to find, but a really, really cool firearm. This is an early import, which actually just has the importation marks up here on the barrel with no other markings on the firearm other than the 56S marking on the left side, the factory 66 code on the trunnion, and then made in China on the top cover. So this is, the earlier ones were void of any type of markings other than that. Most of your import marks like made in China and the caliber up here on the front of the barrel and the importer as well. So this would be an earlier one as well, which is pretty cool. Now, if we look at this militarily, the Type 56-2 was somewhat of the last hurrah of the Chinese military Type 56 rifles. About the time that these were fully developed, they were already coming out with the Type 81, which would replace this in military service, or the Type 56 family in general. So this did not really ever see military service in China, but it was exported to other countries. So pricing on the market of these pre-banned Type 56 rifles, usually anywhere between about $2,000 and $3,000 without the box or anything like that. So they are incredibly pricey. So again, it's on this list not because I recommend it as, the best bang for your buck. That's definitely not the case. This is for somebody who's really interested in AK collecting. This is for the pinnacle of where AKs go, are these pre-banned Chinese AKs. And that'll basically leave it off there. Well guys, that is all the time I have for you today on this. Thank you so much for stopping by and checking out this video. If you enjoyed, please let me know by hitting that like button. Please also consider subscribing to my channel and hit that bell notification button so you are aware when I am posting new content. With that, I will leave you guys off there. I am Chris with Marksman Shooting Sports and WeBuyGuns.com in Westfield, Indiana. You are watching Marksman TV, and I will see you next time.